Let's talk a little bit about another report. This is the era where you're doing six sides of steel, which is a totally different look, I think, than a regular steel cage with four sides. And it became a staple for TNA. Well, AMW, America's Most Wanted, and the Naturals are two early standout tag teams in the sort of the early days of TNA. And they had an incredible match. But there were some people in the torch who were critical of this. Well, specifically, some of the other talent. I guess people were poking fun that all four men walked through the entire cage match prior to the show. And people were sort of making fun of that. And another veteran wrestler told Wade, they don't know any better. No one taught them, and there's nowhere for them to go learn. So this is something that we've heard a lot from old school folks like, oh man, they talked about their match for 2 hours. Back in my day, we used to just call it in the ring. But back in those days, you also had a territory system that was running five, six, seven, sometimes nine shows a week. And that's not where we are here. These guys are wrestling once a week for TNA and maybe on the independents over the weekend, they'll work another time or two, but the reps are just different. It's not the same business. You're a guy who was around the old way where we just called everything in the ring. And now these days where we take a more Randy Savage approach and we know exactly what we're doing. So you've seen both sides. What do you think about the evolution of the business, or is that it? It really is just the evolution. It's got to change.
It just, again, going back to the comments were made, they just don't know any better. That is the biggest crock of shit, Johnny. That is, to me, it screams of haters gonna hate. It screams, hey, I'm a loser and I know it, so let me point a finger at somebody. But when you're pointing a finger at somebody, you probably got three or four pointing back at you because you know that you're not going to put the emotional investment. Me and Lawler had this conversation years ago, because if you ever work with Lawler, I mean, Conrad, it amazed me. It's as if, and he can, in a lot of ways, the art of it, talking under his breath, but then all of a sudden be talking to the ref at a decibel 4 and 5 higher, and then lower it, and he talked to your opponent, and the amount of conversations, and if it's a spot show, he can probably tell you a few jokes in the middle of it. But the communication that you have um, when there are no cameras is obviously completely different than when you're, DDP. I'm going to kind of give you a little progression in my brain off the top of my head. But so when there's not 7 or 8 cameras all over the place, you can have much more of a slow paced, and you can call everything in the ring and the pacing, because you're really just worried about that live event crowd. And that's all you have to open your ear to. Well, Progress, and I'll never forget DDP in Chicago United Center with his T-Mobile phone and stylus and notepad and everything that went with it. And people are like, "Oh, Jeff, I know this driving you crazy." And I'm thinking, "Are you freaking nuts?" In my mind, I'm like, "No, it's a guidepost, because when you have time cues to hit, 7 or 8 cameras, shooting your match, which means they're coming from all different angles, microphones everywhere. You got to have an ebb and a flow and kind of know what you're doing." And for 4 young guys, I'll call them pretty much young. The Naturals all those guys were in their 20s, I think, if not early 30s, maybe. And so them wanting to lay out their match, it's like the conversation that I had with my dad in early 2002 when I'm trying to explain about the X Division. I said, Dad, he's like, well, I've heard it's a bunch of high spots. And I said, yeah, and what's your point? Well, you got to tell stories. Well, no. We'll tell stories. You've always told me you need one story and one personal issue to draw money, but you got to have a 2-hour show on this pay-per-view. So just all the ebb and flow of it. Conrad, I believe it is a sign of passion, and you care when you walk through things and block things and frame things. But the things where it gets to another level, if you have the foundation built, and you know your time and you know your opponent, and you've got several layers, if you will, of things that are laid out, the real pros then get out there live and listen and have, I'll call it a bit of a nuanced ad lib that takes the match to another level. To me, that's what I've always seen the really, really good folks do, is that they've got, for the most part, more than a roadmap. They've got quite a bit, a few things laid out, but to really make it a great um, money drawing match, they do things that were not laid out in the back, that spontaneously came about you, came about organically, and then you knock it out of the park. I just think that's how the business has evolved. Connie, that was a long wind answer. Sorry about that, pal.
No, no, it was a great answer. That's what we're tuning in for. I want to ask you about Antonio Peña. I know that you've got a great relationship with Dorian at AAA, but it's written 20 years ago now that you and Antonio Peña weren't necessarily best of friends. It's written Jarrett is still upset with Peña for showing up late to their meetings and for not sending him talent that he specifically asked for. Recent AAA defector Hector Garza hasn't appeared on any TNA shows lately, so apparently, the relationship between Pena and TNA is on good enough terms that Jarrett doesn't want to rock the boat by using Garza. We haven't spent hardly any time talking about your relationship with Antonio Pena. I mean, I know how tight you are with Dorian, but what was your relationship like with Mr. Pena?
And if I only had been, again, the language barrier, when you're dealing with, I'm the promoter of TNA and he's the promoter of AAA, but we got a language barrier. So we didn't have the opportunity to, hey, let's have a sidebar and I'll tell you things in confidence and you tell me things in confidence. And we can kind of get on the level. So I know what you're thinking and you know what I'm thinking. Unfortunately, not any other reason other than the language barrier. We never got to have that because when I went there, we'll say, his English was certainly a lot better than my Spanish. But regardless, we needed somebody in the room more or less to make sure some translation. So when I'm down there, we'll call it his translator, and when I'm in Nashville, mine. But that being said, it was still, we'll call it somebody that's in the room. We always had a fantastic relationship. I respect him. Conrad, when a generation from now, and obviously things will change, but we're going to be another step away, I think, in a lot of ways, because we're in this world of streaming and people, just as time goes on, I think you have to put Pena right up there at the very tip top of visionaries in professional wrestling. Um, in a lot of ways, because he broke the mold. He walked away from the standard traditional promotion, started a promotion, and really, in a lot of ways, revolutionized Mexico in professional wrestling. Had a great relationship, but here's kind of where I'm going with, and what was your specific question? Because I'll kind of tell you where it broke down, which I had no idea till months, if not a year later. But it all clicked on me when I'm like, damn, why didn't he just kind of say that? Um, so what was your actual question, Conrad?
I was just asking about your relationship with Antonio Pena. That's all.
So when great relationship and the World X Cup and the talent exchanges and he brought me to Mexico as a talent and poured a ton of gas on. I mean, that to this day, I think the way I was entered into the market as a talent and consistently push in those first couple of years, I think still in a lot of ways resonates to this day. In a real positive way. And that's all Antonio Pena. But the communication, it said he was late. I think there were a couple of times he promised me he was coming up. But Conrad, little did I know that he came up. We enjoyed working. He was delivering talent and everything that went with it. And then little by little, he began to believe, and not specifically TNA, but really the U.S. all over again, is that he said, now, I went through this in the 90s and I lost this talent and that talent and this talent and that talent. And he began to think, do I really want to partner up with a U.S. promotion? They're just going to steal my talent again, because a lot of guys went from his promotion to WCW as a part of that cruiserweight infusion of talent, and you couldn't compare American dollars to Mexican pesos, and it really depleted his roster. He didn't want to go down that road again. And had we been able to have that conversation and basically say, I would have said, Pena, what kind of document do you want me to sign for you to know I want to use these guys? I don't have the ability to steal them even if I wanted to, but to give you a comfort level, this is a talent exchange, as opposed to, well, you're going to send this guy, nope, can't make him. Going to send this guy, no, I got him booked here. And that's where it just kind of began to break down. But he didn't want to lose talent to America, and that was where the real breakdown began. On top of hindsight's 2020, he obviously was dealing with his own personal demons.